My name is Isabella Reyes, and I'm 27 years old. What happened when my parents stood at the gates of that $4.20 million mansion last Tuesday is something that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. Picture this: my mother and father staring up at the iron gates of the most exclusive estate in our city, reading the nameplate over and over again, their faces draining of all color as they realized whose property they were standing outside. The same daughter they'd humiliated just 1 month earlier on my birthday, when they handed my brother Ryan the keys to a $60,000 BMW, while sliding a pair of bargain store socks across the table to me, with an apologetic smile. But here's what made that moment at the mansion gate even more devastating for them. They weren't just random visitors admiring expensive real estate. They were there because they'd received an eviction notice and needed to beg the property owner for more time to find new housing. What they discovered when they saw my name engraved on that brass nameplate was that their disappointment daughter wasn't just successful, I was their landlord. And I'd been their secret landlord for the past 3 years while they treated me like the family failure. Before we dive into this story, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy stories about underestimated people revealing their true power at exactly the right moment. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. I love connecting with people who understand that sometimes the biggest revelations happen when family members discover who's really been taking care of them all along. Let me take you back to my 27th birthday party, exactly 38 days ago. I'd driven over to my parents' house for what I thought would be a simple family celebration: cake, a few gifts, maybe some home-cooked dinner. Nothing fancy, just time with the people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally. The living room was decorated with streamers and balloons, and Mom had made my favorite chocolate cake from scratch. Ryan was there with his girlfriend Jessica, looking confident and relaxed in the way that comes from never doubting your place in the family hierarchy. "Before we have cake," Dad announced, "we have some special surprises for our birthday girl." I smiled, genuinely touched by the effort they'd put into the celebration. After years of feeling overlooked, maybe this was finally the moment when they'd acknowledge my achievements and treat me like the successful adult I'd become. "But first," Mom said with obvious excitement, "we have something very special for Ryan too. It's not his birthday, but we've been planning this for months." My stomach dropped slightly, but I kept smiling. Even on my birthday, Ryan was getting gifts too. "Ryan, sweetie, go look out the front window," Dad said, practically vibrating with anticipation. Ryan looked confused but walked over to the window facing the driveway. His reaction was immediate and explosive. "No way. Are you serious? Is that really happy early graduation from law school, son?" Dad boomed. "We wanted to celebrate your achievement properly." I walked over to see what they were talking about and felt my heart sink completely. Sitting in the driveway was a brand new BMW 5 Series, metallic silver with the enormous red bow on the hood. Even from inside the house, I could see the temporary dealer plates and smell that new car scent. "Oh my God, Mom, Dad, this is incredible!" Ryan shouted, rushing outside to examine his gift. I can't believe you did this. This must have cost." "Don't worry about the cost," Mom called after him. "You've worked so hard in law school. You deserve something special." I stood there watching through the window as Ryan ran his hands over the car like a kid in a candy store, Jessica taking photos of him posing with his gift. A $60,000 car. For graduating law school. On my birthday. "Isabella, come sit down," Mom said gently, gesturing toward the couch. "We have your gifts too." I returned to the living room and sat down at the coffee table where 2 small wrapped packages waited for me. After watching Ryan receive a luxury vehicle, these tiny boxes felt even more insignificant. "Open this one first," Dad said, handing me the smaller package. Inside was a pair of socks. Not nice socks, dollar store socks with little cats on them, still with the $3.99 price tag tucked inside. The kind of thoughtless gift you grab at the last minute when you realize you forgot someone's birthday. "We know you're always complaining about cold feet," Mom said with a forced smile. These looked warm and cozy. I held up the socks, trying to process what was happening. A $60,000 car for Ryan's law school graduation celebration on my birthday, and $4 socks for the actual birthday girl. "There's another one," Dad said quickly, perhaps sensing my disappointment. The second package contained a $10 gift card to a chain restaurant. The kind of place college students go when they're splitting the check 4 ways. We thought you could take yourself out for a nice dinner, Mom explained. You work so hard, you deserve a treat. A treat. A $10 treat while my brother got a $60,000 vehicle for his hard work. Ryan came back inside, still glowing with excitement. I can't thank you enough. This is the most incredible gift I've ever received. Jessica, can you believe it? My first luxury car. It's beautiful, Ryan, Jessica gushed. Your parents are so generous. Generous. They just demonstrated exactly how generous they could be when it came to their golden child. Isabella's gifts are lovely too, Mom said, but her voice lacked the enthusiasm she'd had for Ryan's surprise. Practical and thoughtful. Practical. Socks and a gift card to Applebee's were practical. A BMW was a celebration of achievement. During dinner, the conversation naturally centered around Ryan's car, his upcoming bar exam, his job prospects at prestigious law firms. When anyone asked about my work, the responses were politely brief before pivoting back to Ryan's accomplishments. Isabella does something with computers, Dad explained to Jessica's parents, who'd stopped by to see Ryan's car. We don't really understand it, but she seems to stay busy. Something with computers. That's how he described the software development company I'd built from nothing into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Ryan's going to be making 6 figures right out of law school, Mom bragged. Top of his class, you know. We're so proud. I excused myself early, claiming I had work commitments the next morning. As I gathered my thoughtful gifts, the socks and gift card, Mom pulled me aside. Isabella, I hope you're not upset about Ryan's car. We've been planning this surprise for months, and the timing just happened to coincide with your birthday. It's fine, Mom. We love both our children equally. You know that, right? I looked at her, this woman who'd just spent $60,000 celebrating one child's achievements while giving the other child discount socks, and nodded. I know. But driving home in my modest Honda Civic, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. I'd spent years making excuses for their favoritism, telling myself they just didn't understand my industry or my success. But tonight had made it clear, they understood value perfectly when they wanted to show it. The irony was crushing. While they were celebrating Ryan's potential future earnings, I was already generating more revenue in a quarter than he'd likely make in his first 3 years as a lawyer. While they were proud of his academic achievements, I was running a company with 43 employees and annual revenues of $18 million door to. But the most ironic part of all? For the past 3 years, I'd been their anonymous benefactor without them ever knowing it. You see, 2 years ago, my parents had gotten into serious financial trouble. Dad's small contracting business had suffered during an economic downturn, and they'd fallen behind on their mortgage payments. They were facing foreclosure on the house I'd grown up in, the house where Ryan had just received his BMW tow. When I learned about their situation through my cousin Maria, I didn't offer to help directly. I knew they'd either refuse out of pride or accept with resentment. Instead, I did something more complicated but ultimately more effective. I bought their house. Not from them directly, I created a holding company, had my lawyers handle all the negotiations, and purchased the property from the bank before foreclosure proceedings could finalize. Then I had the holding company offer to rent the house back to my parents at exactly what they could afford to pay. To them, it looked like they'd found an incredibly generous landlord who was willing to rent them their own home at below market rates. They had no idea their mysterious benefactor was their own daughter, paying their property taxes, handling maintenance issues, and essentially subsidizing their housing costs while they treated me like the family disappointment. For 3 years I'd been secretly taking care of them financially while they celebrated Ryan's potential and dismissed my reality. But, sitting in my car outside their house, watching Ryan show off his birthday BMW to neighbors, I made a decision that would change everything. It was time for them to learn who their landlord really was. If you've ever been the family member whose achievements are overlooked while someone else gets celebrated for potential, type invisible success in the comments. What happens next is going to show you exactly how powerful it can be when hidden generosity meets public revelation. The eviction notice was never my plan. It was the law. 3 weeks after my birthday party, my property management company informed me that my tenants, my parents, were 2 months behind on rent and showing no signs of catching up. According to the rental agreement they'd signed with my holding company 3 years earlier, they had 30 days to remedy the situation or face eviction proceedings. I could have quietly covered their missed payments, the same way I'd been quietly covering their lives for years. But something about those birthday socks and that BMW had shifted my perspective. Why was I protecting people from the consequences of their choices when they clearly didn't value, or even acknowledge my contributions to their lives? So I let the process proceed normally. My property management company sent the required notices, followed all legal protocols, and scheduled the eviction hearing. My parents had no idea that their mysterious landlord was the same daughter they'd given $4 socks to while spending $60,000 on their son. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. I didn't attend. My property manager handled all the legal proceedings on behalf of the holding company. But I did ask him to inform my parents that the property owner was willing to meet with them personally before the eviction was finalized, in case they wanted to negotiate a payment plan or discuss alternatives. That meeting was scheduled for Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m. At my house. My house, which happened to be the $4.20 million estate I'd purchased 6 months earlier in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. The house with the iron gates, the circular driveway, and the brass nameplate that read, I Reyes in elegant script. I watched from my security cameras as their car pulled up to the gate at exactly 2 p.m. Dad was driving their 12-year-old Honda, the same car they'd been driving since before I graduated college, the same car they claimed they couldn't afford to replace even though they'd somehow found $60,000 for Ryan's BMW. They sat in the car for a full 5 minutes, staring up at the mansion, clearly intimidating by the grandeur of the property and probably wondering what kind of wealthy person owned their modest rental house. Finally, Dad got out and approached the intercom system at the gate. I watched him press the button and waited for him to speak. Hello? This is Richard Reyes. I have an appointment at 2 p.m. with the property owner. About the rental house on Maple Street. I let a few seconds pass before responding through the intercom, disguising my voice slightly. Please come up to the main entrance. Someone will meet you there. The gates opened automatically and I watched their Honda make its way up my circular driveway, looking tiny and out of place against the backdrop of my landscaped grounds. They parked near the front entrance and sat in their car for another few minutes, clearly overwhelmed by their surroundings. I positioned myself at the front door and waited for them to ring the bell. When they finally approached, I could see them through the glass panels flanking my entrance. Dad had dressed in his best suit, the same one he'd worn to Ryan's law school graduation. Mom was wearing a dress I recognized from church, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. The doorbell rang, and I opened the door immediately. The silence that followed was absolute. They stood there on my marble front steps, their mouths literally hanging open as their brains processed what they were seeing. Hello, Mom, Dad, please, come in. Dad recovered first, though his voice came out as barely a whisper. Isabella? What are you doing here? This is my home. Your home? Mom repeated, looking around at the crystal chandelier, the marble floors, the sweeping staircase that curved up to the second floor. Isabella, this house must be worth $4.2 million. I finished. I paid cash. They followed me into my living room, moving like people in a dream. Everything about the space screamed wealth and success: custom furniture, original artwork, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens. I don't understand, Dad said, sinking onto my Italian leather sofa. How can you afford? How is this possible? The same way I've been affording to be your landlord for the past 3 years. The color drained completely from both their faces. Landlord? Mom whispered. The holding company that bought your house when you were facing foreclosure? That's my company. The generous landlord who's been charging you below market rent and covering all your maintenance costs? That's me. The person you came here to beg for more. Time to pay your overdue rent? Also me. Dad's hands were shaking. You own our house? I bought it to keep you from losing it. I've been subsidizing your housing costs for 3 years while you celebrated Ryan's potential and ignored my reality. But how, your business? You thought I did something with computers. You thought my work was cute but not serious. You thought I was struggling while Ryan was succeeding. I sat down across from them, maintaining perfect composure. What I actually do is run a software development company with 43 employees and $18 million annual revenue. The BMW you bought Ryan for graduation, I make that much in profit every 6 days. The silence stretched between us while they processed this information. 18 million? Dad finally managed. This year. Last year was 16.4 million. The year before was 12.8 million. I've been building this company for 7 years while you've been treating me like your unsuccessful child who needed to figure her life out. Mom started crying. Isabella, we didn't know. You didn't know because you never asked. You never showed interest in my work beyond dismissive comments about computers. You never celebrated my achievements because you were too busy planning celebrations for Ryan's potential achievements. We're proud of you, Dad said desperately. We've always been proud, Dad. 1 month ago, on my birthday, you gave me $4 socks while handing Ryan a $60,000 car. If that's how you show pride in my achievements, I'd hate to see how you'd treat me if you were disappointed. That was different. The car was for his graduation, and what was my gift for? What achievement of mine were you celebrating with discount socks? He couldn't answer because there wasn't an answer. They hadn't been celebrating anything about me. The socks were an afterthought, a way to avoid appearing to have forgotten my birthday entirely while they celebrated Ryan's accomplishments. The eviction notice, Mom said suddenly. Are you going to make us leave our home? It's not your home, I said gently but firmly. It's my home. I own it. You're tenants who haven't paid rent in 2 months. We can get caught up on the payments, Dad said quickly. Business has been slow, but we have some contracts coming through. Dad, you're 2 months behind on rent that I've deliberately kept artificially low. The market rate for that house is $1,200 more than what you've been paying. I've been subsidizing your housing to the tune of over $40,000 since I bought the property. $40,000, Mom repeated numbly. $43,200, to be exact. Money I've never mentioned, never asked you to acknowledge, never expected thanks for. I've been taking care of you financially while you treated me like the child who couldn't get her life together. Why? Dad asked. Why would you do all this without telling us? Because I love you. Because I wanted to help without making it about pride or power, or who owed what to whom. Because I thought family helped family, even when that help wasn't acknowledged or appreciated. But you're telling us now. I'm telling you now because something changed on my birthday. Watching you give Ryan a luxury car while sliding bargain socks across the table to me made me realize that my anonymous generosity wasn't protecting your pride. It was enabling your blindness. I stood up and walked to my window, looking out. Tea at the gardens I'd had professionally designed and maintained. You can't see my success when it's invisible, and you can't appreciate my generosity when it's anonymous. So I decided to make both visible. What happens now? Mom asked quietly. Now you have a choice. You can acknowledge who I actually am, not the struggling daughter who does something with computers, but the successful CEO who's been secretly supporting your family for years. Or you can continue living in your fantasy where Ryan is the only real success story, and Isabella is just the afterthought who gets socks for her birthday. We want to acknowledge you, Dad said immediately. Isabella, we had no idea. That's the problem, Dad. You had no idea because you never looked. You never asked. You never paid attention to anything about my life unless it was to compare it unfavorably to Ryan's. I turned back to face them. The rent you owe is $3,600. I'll give you 2 weeks to decide whether you want to stay in my house as tenants who understand and respect who their landlord is, or whether you'd prefer to find alternative housing, where you can continue pretending I'm not successful in you. To deserve birthday gifts better than discount socks. Isabella, please, Mom said, reaching toward me. We don't want to lose our home, and we don't want to lose you. You're not losing me. But you are going to start seeing me. The real me. Not the version of me that fits your assumptions about success and failure. They left that day with a lot to think about and 2 weeks to come up with the money they owed. But more importantly, they left with the knowledge that their family dynamics had been built on a foundation of financial support they'd never acknowledged from the daughter they'd never properly valued. The conversations that followed over the next 2 weeks were unlike any we'd ever had as a family. For the first time in my adult life, my parents asked detailed questions about my work, my company, my achievements. They wanted to understand how I'd built something so successful while they'd remained oblivious to it. Why didn't you ever correct us? Mom asked during one of our phone calls. When we said you did something with computers, why didn't you explain what you really did? I tried for years. But every time I mentioned business success, you'd change the subject to Ryan's latest achievement. Every time I tried to share good news, you'd minimize it or assume I was exaggerating. Eventually, I stopped trying. We failed you, Dad said during another conversation. We completely failed to see who you were and what you'd accomplished. You failed to look, I corrected. But it's not too late to start. Ryan's reaction to learning the truth was the most surprising of all. When he found out I'd been our parents' secret landlord and financial supporter, he was mortified. "Isabella, I'm so sorry," he said when he called me after Dad explained everything. "I had no idea they were treating you that way, or that you'd been helping them financially. The car, the way they celebrated my stuff while ignoring yours, it was wrong and I should have said something." "You couldn't have known about the house situation," I told him, "but I knew about the birthday gifts. I knew about how they talked about your work versus mine. I saw the inequality, and I let it slide because it benefited me." That conversation led to the first honest relationship Ryan and I had ever had as adults. He returned the BMW dough. "I can't drive a car that represents everything wrong with how our family has treated you," he said. "It feels wrong knowing you were secretly supporting them, while they were publicly dismissing you." My parents tried to insist he keep it, but Ryan was firm. "If you want to celebrate my achievements, celebrate them appropriately. But I'm not accepting $60,000 gifts while my sister gets socks, especially not while she's been the one actually taking care of this family financially." The money they owed me was paid within the 2-week deadline. Dad took out a small business loan, and Mom picked up extra shifts at her part-time job. But, more importantly, they started treating me like the successful adult I'd always been. 6 months later, my parents hosted a proper celebration for my company's 8th anniversary. They invited extended family, prepared an elaborate dinner, and Dad gave a speech about his daughter, the successful CEO who built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing. The difference in how relatives treated me was immediate and dramatic. Suddenly, everyone wanted to hear about my work, my achievements, my plans for expansion. The same people who'd made polite small talk about my computer hobby were now asking detailed questions about software development and entrepreneurship. But the most meaningful change was in how my parents talked about both their children. Instead of comparing us, they started celebrating us differently. Ryan's legal career and my business empire were different kinds of success that deserve different kinds of recognition. "We have two very different children who've both built impressive careers," Mom now says when people ask about her family. "Ryan's going to be an excellent lawyer, and Isabella has already revolutionized how small businesses handle their software needs. The mansion remains mine, of course, and my parents remain my tenants. But the relationship has transformed from anonymous charity to transparent family support. They now understand exactly who's been taking care of them and why. The real victory wasn't revealing my wealth or proving my success. It was finally being seen and valued by the people whose opinion had always mattered most to me, even when their behavior suggested I didn't matter to them." Sometimes the people who love you need to understand exactly how much you've been loving them back before they can appreciate who you really are. And sometimes that understanding requires a mansion gate with your name on it, and an eviction notice that forces the truth into the light. The daughter who got socks for her birthday had been secretly maintaining the house where those socks were given. The family disappointment had been the family's financial foundation. And the child they'd overlooked had been the one keeping them afloat while they celebrated her brother's potential. 3 years after buying their house, 18 months after the mansion gate revelation, and countless family dinners where my achievements are finally acknowledged appropriately, I can say, this success isn't just about building something extraordinary, it's about being recognized for what you've built by the people who matter most. And when that recognition finally comes, when your parents finally understand that their struggling daughter has actually been their secret benefactor all along, it feels like the most expensive mansion in the world is worth exactly what you paid for it. The socks, by the way, are still in my bedroom drawer. Not because I treasure them as gifts, but because they remind me of the moment I decided to stop accepting being undervalued by people I'd been secretly overvaluing for years. What gifts have you received that told you exactly how your family sees your worth? What success have you been hiding from people who can't see it anyway? Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been the overlooked family member who was actually holding everyone together, you're not alone. Comment hidden support if you believe in the power of anonymous generosity. Share this story with someone who needs to know that being underestimated while secretly succeeding can lead to the most satisfying revelations of all. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories about family dynamics, financial revelations, and the moment when invisible success becomes undeniably visible. I'd love to know, should family members always know who's been helping them financially, or is anonymous support sometimes more powerful? Let me know in the comments. Remember, your worth isn't determined by their gifts to you. Sometimes the most meaningful gift you can give them is the revelation of who you really are.